Hello everyone, welcome to the Escape Pod. I'm Josiah.
I'm Nathan.
And today we are doing our discussion on the Hellraiser franchise. All 10 movies.
Oof.
All 10.
That's
This was something that had been delayed for many years. For reference, we were originally going to do this back when only 9 movies existed. And then there was such a big break in between, you can understand that,
It actually, we might have had this idea before there was 9 movies. Like, there might have just been 8 movies, because the 9th was 2011. And that's like...
I don't think we planned before. It was probably 2012. So it was right after, because we were doing different horror movie marathons. We started with Saw, and then Scream. I remember that. Yeah. And then I think the next year we did Halloween. I can't remember. Yeah, because we did Halloween before we did Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we did this weird... Well, I showed for you the first time. Obviously, you had seen Freddy vs. Jason, but we watched Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Evil Dead, like all in chronological order, which was a beast. But anyway, Hellraiser was always floating around, and there was a point where most of the movies were on Netflix, and I was like, hey, I've only seen like the first 2, so I'm sure this gets really bad, but it was just very hard to commit to. And then suddenly we were just like, no, fuck it, this Halloween we're actually gonna watch Hellraiser.
Yeah, like I think a week or 2 before, or like 2 or 3 weeks before Halloween, we were like, let's just go through Hellraiser, why not?
Yeah. And you revisited Saw, but I wanted us to see like a new horror franchise and kind of evaluate it.
Absolutely.
Because going into this, explain kind of your brief kind of context that you had for Hellraiser, like everything you knew before you watched the movies.
You had told me how the 4 Cenobites of the first movie were the inspiration for the God Hand in Berserk. But outside of that, I assumed it was... I don't know why, I assumed it was something like the Saw series, where it was just like uber torture, but with like notes of celestial demonic things. Right. Like, I had no concept of what the series was outside of the Cenobites. So it was, a lot of twists and turns I was not expecting.
Yeah, because there was a few things that I kept from you that I knew that there was a movie all about how it's in the real world and it's a video game, which was the one I was dreading the most.
Yeah.
But, going into it, I think I assumed that the quality would just decrease literally, like, each movie would just be a step down further into hell. And for a bit, it kind of was.
Kind of.
But then we kind of reflected back and we're like, no, it's a bit different. So I guess we'll discuss our rankings, because I ranked them. And I think you and I basically agreed 100% on what it was.
I think probably.
But what did you think about the first movie, Hellraiser, directed by the original writer of the story, Clive Barker?
I think it was great. I love the effects for everything. Reminded me of The Thing, which I watched also fairly recently. But
yeah, the whole coming out of the floorboards bit is like such a disturbing scene. It's from a practical effects standpoint.
Yeah, I think
Frank's return.
Like, you can argue all you want, like day and night, of how like a CGI recreation will be able to be like more anatomically correct. Like, this is what it would look like if a human came together, but like, fuck off. That is so unsettling to see practical effects showing like a skeleton form out of a floor and
attached to the brain. It's so nasty. It's really great. Like, that's probably like one of the high points of the movie. But also, one thing I love about Hellraiser is it's really well executed and great. As a lot of the time, the first movie in the horror franchise is usually the best, direction-wise and everything. But for this one, what I liked about this is that the plot is so different, because it's like, the Cenobites are actually kind of barely in it. They're not really slasher movie villains. It's more Frank and Julia.
Yeah.
And Julia being the villain kind of is really, really interesting to me. And originally, she was going to be the villain of the whole franchise until things changed after part 2. But and then Kirsty, our kind of lead character is very relatable, and she's very attractive and
intelligent for a horror series.
Yeah, I love her attitude where she's just kind of like, oh, fuck this.
Yeah.
Like, she reacts very realistically, but it's never at the expense of the fear.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of the time in horror movies where, like, I want my character to just react like, you know, a realistic reaction, like, oh, shit. And, like, be really like, I'm just done with this bullshit. But they always go way too comedic rather than...
in Chapter 2.
Well, yeah, that's a low point, so... But, yeah, Hellraiser 1, you know, again, it's a very simple plot. It's just, like, the Sweeney Todd thing of just bring people up here and then I'll just get enough blood and body parts and I'll just assemble myself a new body. It'll be fine. And then the twist becomes... Well, it's not really a twist, but the whole subversion is, oh, well, then he takes on his more kind brother's aspect while he's doing some of the horrible stuff later, which is really cool. And then it makes you think like, oh, well, maybe in the sequel that actor will come back who's, you know, it was really great, but he doesn't.
No, Frank comes back.
Frank comes back. Thank God it was the same actor.
Yeah.
But apparently, so I don't know if you knew this movie was, you know, it's set in London, and like there was a bunch of British actors, and they dubbed over all of them.
Oh, really?
All of the British actors besides Julia is like dubbed, like the handyman, the boyfriend character, even Frank was dubbed over. But then in the second movie, Frank is like, he sounds like close enough where it's like, oh, I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
But it's this weird thing where they were like, American audiences won't relate if they sound British. And that's a complete lie. Why do we still read Sherlock Holmes stories and watch those adaptations?
Yeah.
And all that shit. It's weird, but again, I also like how Hellraiser is a bit different from other horror franchises because it's much more focused on like actually having complex like sexual imagery and themes, not just, well, he stabbed in the chick who was having sex, so in a sense he impaled her.
Just penetration.
He penetrated, and it's like, okay, that's like Babies 101, you know, symbolism. Whereas this movie's like, no, there's like a lot more going on in terms of like all the levels of it, and the fact that like the main characters are like, no, like honestly, lust is like our biggest vice.
We are so into like BDSM and like, hardcore shit that we sought demonic intervention to make it even more so. And it's like, oh.
It's interesting that you compared it to The Thing, because I would say Hellraiser and The Thing are probably two of the best Lovecraft movies that aren't really an adaptation of Lovecraft. Because it is all about like seeking the knowledge that you shouldn't seek. And then once you do, it's like, oh, it's not what I expected, and you get punished for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hellraiser 1 is a great movie. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies, and I'll probably go back to that one. Well, we'll talk about which ones we'd go back to out of this series, but going into Hellraiser 2, what did so since you had no context for this series, what did you think about Hellraiser 2's way of being like a kind of a direct sequel like Halloween 2, but it was a much different like structured plot?
Well, you had told me that a lot of the Hellraiser fan base thinks that it's a massive drop in quality from 1 to 2.
Right.
And it is a drop in quality, I can agree, but I don't think it is as bad. It did make me worried that the series was going to be, oh no, this person escaped this time, whereas like in the first movie, the Cenobites are like, this is impossible, this can't happen.
Yeah, it was like such a rare thing that Frank got away.
To have it happen again definitely made me nervous for storytelling and how to maintain the horror and inescapability of the Cenobite realm, and you know, that sort of eternal punishment when we now have 2 for 2 characters breaking out.
Because they do the thing where I just accept it because it's so fucking like funny and awesome, where the whole point is like Frank was getting like the other people's blood and then he had to take somebody else's skin. Yeah. It's not that he was becoming himself again. Because in part 2, he's only himself in hell. But when Julia's coming back, there's a bit where she has like the rags, and she takes it off, and she's just beautiful like Julia again with her same like appearance, and it's like, that's really funny. But but I also just don't mind because I like the actress and all that. But it is interesting how in this movie we get a bit more of the Cenobites, and I think it's still an effective amount because we do, you know, somewhat learn more about them. Like we see where they come from, which is another dimension that's called Hell, but it's ruled over by a giant thing, like this obelisk called Leviathan. That the Morse code coming out of it is saying God, so that's really creepy.
Yeah, it also gives you this really interesting look into the mentality and the morality of the Cenobites.
Right.
Because in the first movie,
I know what you're going with.
We have her going, oh, wait, I'm summoning you guys, not because I want to, like, fuck with your shit, and, you know, I know that's stupid and will get me in trouble, but hey, just so you know, this fucker broke out. And they're like, all right, fine. We'll clean up and fine. You get a pass. And then she encounters him again, and they're like, you want this, don't you? And she's like, no, listen, misunderstanding again. And he's like, okay.
Leaving so soon, are you? And then in this movie, this doctor who's running this institute is, like, getting other people, like savants and people to open the box. And then Pinhead and the other Cenobites come out, and they're just like, it is not hands that call us, but desire. No, can't we just take her? No. Then they just leave, and it's like, that's so honorable of you.
I love that Pinhead is... It's so interesting, because
we haven't talked about him directly yet.
Yeah, because I don't know if I would call him even lawful evil. He's kind
of neutral.
Yeah,
evil.
He's lawful neutral.
Yeah, he's like lawful neutral. Yeah, it's weird.
Like, he's certainly not good, but like he typically only goes after someone that has brought hubris upon themselves.
Yeah,
as you know, sort of this basically divine punishment. Like, he doesn't go after Kirsty because he realizes that he doesn't go after the savant chick. Yeah, he's like, she doesn't know what she's fucking doing.
And it's real great that we get Kirsty again, because it creates this continuity. Again, it feels to me like Halloween 1 and 2, the originals, where it's like, this feels like I can just watch 1 and 2 back to back, and it's one consistent story, barring a few little things. And whereas like other series, it's like, this is very bizarre.
The only thing that's kind of iffy, and I could just not be remembering it very clearly, the boyfriend character just kind of ups and vanishes.
I was about to say that, like, there's no trace of him. And then she has this romance with one of the doctors.
Yeah,
one
of the nice doctors who then just dies. It's like,
very bizarre.
Very interesting.
Because then Dr. Chenard, we actually see... Because we kind of assume that the Cenobites may have been human at one point in the first movie. But we don't know, and then in this movie, it's like, no, you actually see someone, like, be transformed into a Cenobite.
Yeah.
And he becomes this giant, like, floating saw guy on a penis.
Yeah, really uncomfortable.
Yeah, very, very, very bad. And then we get to see Pinhead and Butterball and the female Cenobite. Oh, sorry, wait, no, Butterball's not in this one. Yeah, that's the weird thing, and two, is that, like...
Oh, yeah, because he got crushed by debris, and I guess that
took him out of the game. Yeah, in the first movie, he just gets hit by debris, and it's like, well, he's gone. What?
I thought he just despawned. No.
Because at the end of the first movie, the fucking homeless man turns out to be the demon dragon that returns that is apparently the Asian man who sells you the box in the faraway land. And then that kind of comes back in this movie, and that the homeless guy's on the spinning pillar at the end, but anyway, to get back to my point, yeah, Butterball's not in this, so it's very bizarre because all the other Cenobites from the first movie are back, but not him. So there's 3 instead of 4, and I like that there was 4 because it was like balanced.
Yeah.
But now that there's 3, and they recast the female Cenobite, but you don't really notice too much.
No, you don't.
And then they cut a scene where Chatterer like gets like a more human appearance.
So they transform him from being eyeless to having eyes because the actor like actually couldn't see. So they try to explain it in the movie, but then they cut that scene. So there's literally like one scene of him without eyes, and then he just has eyes.
Yeah, that was very weird. Mm-hmm. That was very odd because in the first scene where he comes back, he doesn't.
Yeah.
And then like he's not really the focus of many shots after, but then he just has eyes, and you're like, what the fuck is that? But yeah, so we get to basically the whole thing culminates with, you know, Frank is actually the person calling from hell, and Kirsty thought it was her dad.
Yeah.
And so she goes to save him, and it's Frank, and he just wants to, like, fuck his niece for all time, and it's like, this is very disturbing. And, of course, he gets beaten, and then Julia gets beaten, and then Dr. Chenard kills the human forms of the original 3 Cenobites, and it's this tragic scene of just, like, Pinhead's character just going, like, yeah, like, listen, I understand that I fucked up. And then he just immediately dies, and it's like, oh. And they just all get killed. It reminded me of, like, the whole... I call it the Jurassic Park 3 effect, even though it's not proper, where it's just like, yeah, that thing that was, like, the ultimate badass in the previous ones, it just gets killed easily by the thing in the new movies. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Like, he kind of throws his hooks at Dr. Chenard, and then it just doesn't work.
Yeah, well, and it's so weird, because it kind of shows that... It's another one of those indicators that Pinhead wasn't originally meant to be the staple of the franchise.
No. Well, because in the original novel, he's not.
No.
He's like a minor part.
Well, and again, it gets... the reason he's so big in the first 2 is because the other Cenobites' makeup literally makes it difficult for them to speak, so they just got most of their lines.
Yeah.
But then everyone fucking loves him because
it's Doug Bradley.
Doug Bradley's fucking quality.
Which I tricked Nathan again. I kind of deceived him because I said, like, yeah, there's a certain point where Doug Bradley leaves the franchise, but I'm not telling you which entry he leaves. So every movie, Nathan would just be watching the credits going, oh God, oh thank God it's Doug Bradley as Pinhead.
And it's so great because most of them will go through all of it, and I'd be like, oh fuck, and then it would go, and Doug Bradley. I'm like, oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah, because every time you were just, like, on the edge of your seat, like, oh, no, I don't want this to be the one where he's gone.
Yeah.
And it turns out he was 8 out of 10, so that's
pretty good.
Pretty good average.
And, yeah, when he's 8 out of 10 and one of the other two is really good, that's just,
Yeah, I'll say that. One of the other two. No spoilers. Yeah, Hellraiser 2, I'd say, is a slight step down, but overall it's fairly consistent, and the style, it feels similar. Unlike the next one, Hellraiser 3, which opens on Captain Elliot Spencer, which is Pinhead's his original persona, this World War I colonel or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then the opening scene is him, like, opening the box and getting transformed.
Is this where they do, like, weird... Or it's later in the movie where it's, like, frozen time? Because they, like, couldn't... They do some weird measure of going around it.
But in this movie, Kirsty is not the main character again.
No.
Even though she's alive at the end of 2.
Yeah.
And... we get this new character played by Terry Farrell from Deep Space Nine. And she's okay, given how bad the script is.
Yeah.
Because 3 is pretty not good.
It's pretty not good.
Because it completely changes style and is like, well, what if we just were like a slasher movie? And what if Pinhead, when he died, that actually just killed his human part, but the evil of Pinhead remained, and so now he's just making jokes.
And he got turned into a pillar of things that is trapped, but you have to feed him.
Yeah. It's like continuing the whole thing with Julia and Frank from the first 2 movies.
Kinda, yeah.
But it only lasts like the first third at most of the movie. And so you get this really thing where it's like, okay, interesting, Pinhead's gonna be like basically not in the movie till the end. I thought it was kind of going for Nightmare on Elm Street 2, where it's like at the very end he like comes out and then is able to wreck shit. But for the whole movie he's kind of just like being menacing. But in this movie he just comes back and starts...
Yeah, this random dickhead gets the pillar of flesh that he was trapped in that pops up at the end of 2 in like a really like what the fuck ending. Yeah. And then he's like, oh, I love fucking these random bitches. And then, oh, this pillar told me to just sacrifice them, so fuck it, I'll do it. I'm an asshole. And it's like, okay.
It's very sloppy.
It's very, very sloppy.
And again, the only thing we get of Kirsty is Terry Farrell finds like a video of her, like, it's literally like the Sarah Connor video, but worse. Like in like, T2.
Yeah, because it's framed like way farther away.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, and she's like, listen, no, this is like Pinhead. So very clearly, like, she didn't just have a happily ever after. And it's like, well, then why isn't she the main character? Like, just, I would prefer you just keep it more consistent.
Well, she'll come back.
Yes, she does. Spoilers. Yeah. But this movie's pretty just like, what if Pinhead was just killing people in clubs and like, being more over the top? And yeah, some of that, like him doing the stigmata in the church and the flames of the candle going up is like, that's funny, but it's also like, this has none of the weight or gravitas of the character from the previous 2 films.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because unlike a lot of horror movies, like Pinhead's a very, like they talked about, to Doug Bradley said at least, that he pictured him like Dracula. Mm-hmm. Like he's a very dignified, honorable, very kind of controlled, like he's almost apathetic kind of character. And then in this movie, he's just like evil laughing and doing all this shit. And while the plot technically explains why, we get this weird thing where it's like, we have to pull Elliot Spencer's spirit out of like the Nexus and merge it with Pinhead, and then he will not want to kill everyone randomly and turn them into Cenobites, which I didn't like the new Cenobites really.
No.
CD guy, camera guy with a camera out of his face. The chick had a cigarette in her vagina throat.
Yeah, she was the chick that was friends with she had like the Catwoman apprentice relationship from Dark Knight Rises with her, and it wasn't good. But
no,
again,
it was not.
But again, if they had merged the 2 halves of Pinhead, and then he's regular Pinhead, I'd be like, okay, but that's not what happens. They merge the 2 halves, and we see this very clear conflict while he is in Pinhead form, where he's like, no, I still want to be evil as shit. No, I want to be good. And it's like, I thought combining it makes this balance.
Yes.
No, apparently not.
But that's not the character arc.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we get this thing where it's like, sorry, I need to double check. I don't want to say something incorrect. So at the end, there's this thing where So Pinhead's humanity gets restored, and the Lament configuration sends Joey, is her name, back to Earth, and she buries it in like a pool of concrete where they're building a new building. And then later, and I remember watching this, and I was like, what a bizarre ending. Later, we see that the building is now basically a building in the style of the box.
Oh, yeah.
And at first you're like, why? What? And it does make sense, because that is technically set up for the next movie.
Technically, yeah.
Hellraiser Bloodline, which is one of the more ambitious sequels.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people call it Hellraiser in Space, which not the most of it is not in space.
Yeah, it's more like Hellraiser the Fountain.
Where it's 3 timelines.
Yeah,
which means that the future timeline is chronologically the last in the series.
Yes.
So it's this weird like thing where if you look at Pinhead's characterization, like at some point it's like, no, then he kind of goes back to like this version that is more consistent with the prequel time period in this movie, and it's like, okay.
Alright.
I understand. You wanted to end it, I guess. But this whole thing we get is like, we find out the origins of the box, which is like this French inventor made like a very rudimentary version.
Yeah.
And the whole movie is kind of like how, as technology advances, our sexual appetites kind of change, and like, like mankind is becoming more mechanical and it's colder. Like the new Cenobite in this movie, the new female Cenobite, she's more about like seducing people and like passion, and it's like from the more classic kind of gothic horror, and then Pinhead represents kind of like the futuristic kind of more mechanized horror. So I did like that kind of theming with the characters.
And it's interesting because I remember reading the trivia about how the dynamic between, I forget what her name, like Isabella or some shit.
It's sorry, real quick, we'll cut this out.
Whatever her name is.
That is Angelique.
Yeah.
Angelique is the new Cenobite in this film.
Yeah, I remember her thing was supposed to be, she was supposed to be like the super fire and brimstone, make everyone suffer and wail and all this stuff, and Pinhead was much more of like the, no, we need order and a structure to this, and like, but then they edit it so much to the point where it's like, oh, there's like maybe kind of some kind of weird romance between them, but mostly they're rivals in some way, and it's like, it's
a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
And again, I think initially watching this one, we were like, well, no, they are going downwards in quality. But then we were like, no, wait, this movie has way more ambition and subtlety than the last movie did.
Yeah, it started off and it was very dull.
Yes.
And then once we hit like towards the halfway point, I was like, this is actually a lot better than 3.
Oh, yeah.
Was,
like, I did like the whole kind of time shifting, my ancestors are developing different versions of the box, because then we find out because it takes place in like the classic wooden box, which predates even the one we saw in the first 3 movies.
Yeah.
Then you get the building we see in the 3rd movie, which is the present day. And then you get the future like space station box, which is what he uses to destroy Pinhead once and for all.
Yeah, he like has to, what is it? He has to make like perpetual light in order to...
Yeah, he like bounces light in between these things, and it creates like, it's this whole
some
thing.
Kind of energy that cancels it all out, and his was the first version that finally perfected it and made it work.
Yeah, which the movie opens with this hilarious scene of a robot trying to open the box and it just blows up. And they replay that at the end of the movie.
And it has like a concerned beep as it's like, I'm gonna die.
And then blows up, which, great.
That's, that's something else.
But yeah, overall, I liked Pinhead. He was definitely closer to the first 2 movies.
Absolutely.
But he was a bit more malevolent.
Yeah.
He definitely, I think the way they kind of justified that was his rivalry with this bloodline.
Yeah.
Is kind of what makes him go like, no, like, now it ends. Now, like, Pinhead was kind of like saying like, no, we're ending this now. So there was definitely some drama. There was some, stakes to the whole end kind of battle with Pin. Like, it's like, oh, it took all these years, but we finally beat him. Like, we finally got far enough to beat him.
And you get like this weird, like, small scale, like, Space Marines versus Cenobites.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, and there's like the Hell Dog.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's very interesting.
But yeah, definitely I would say this movie was a step up from 3. And you could view 1, 2, and 4 as like a trilogy. That would thematically make sense. And
yeah, I'd marathon that.
I'd marathon that. I would go back to 4. I think 4 could use a rewatch now that I have the full context.
Absolutely.
And then
I would not go back. 5.
No. I actually need to look up what the title is because I repressed it. So that is Hellraiser Inferno, directed by Scott Derrickson of Doctor Strange fame and Sinister.
Yeah, and it's shitty just like Doctor Strange and Sinister.
It's not a good movie.
It's very bad.
This is basically a Silent Hill movie. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, what if a main character was guilty about something and it was all about him being punished? So basically the only Pinhead you get like a couple flashes of him and then he's in the very end. This is effectively, and it wasn't supposed to be a Hellraiser movie. They made it a Hellraiser movie. And you can feel that because there's like vaguely looking Cenobite things that mess with the main character. But this whole thing of, so he's a detective, but he's an asshole. And then he finds out the mystery, and the mystery is, oh, I'm in hell and I can never solve this mystery. I loop it again. And it's like, this story's been done before.
Been done better.
It's been done better. It's been done better after this. It's kind of boring.
Yes,
it's very boring.
It's very boring.
There's like bits where like the mind-fucking nature of it, because you know it's not real.
Yes.
Like I knew from the beginning, like, oh, he's in some kind of like loop-de-loop of hell. But some of that was very inventive, but it's not enough to make me like consider this anything other than trash.
Well, because the next movie kind of does this, but better.
It does it better because, so, honestly, like, 5, I have very little to say other than it's really bad.
Yes.
Because there's not a lot that's going on.
Same.
It's just like, the main character's an asshole. Hope you like watching him. And it's like, I don't, really.
I don't.
I like solving puzzles. So your punishment is you could never solve this puzzle. Okay.
All right.
But 6 is kind of the same movie, but a bit more interesting and doesn't take itself as seriously.
And it's this is one with Kirsty.
This is where Kirsty comes back, but it's not good.
And this is where I think I was high as balls for this, but I remember having the revelation that there's technically like 3 levels of reality that we're watching.
Yes.
And they change the coloring and like it looks way different so you have like visual cues to know which level you're in.
Which was very, very clever. Like, as soon as you pointed that out to me, I'm like, oh, man, this movie actually is, like, functioning on some kind of a higher level than what it is presenting. Because we do... It is much more of, like, I felt much more engaged with this film.
Yeah.
Whereas the 5th movie was kind of like, I already know what the plot is, because I've seen this so many times. 6 was like, I know what the plot is, but it's, like... doing it in such a way that I'm like my brain is engaged with figuring out what is real.
Yeah.
Like I'm honestly curious like if any of this is real or if some of it is real, and like what is Kirsty's purpose being in the plot, because she quote unquote dies, which we know she isn't dead.
Yeah.
But it is like interesting how they kind of throw you off the trail and you're like, well, I truly don't know. They screw up her character, unfortunately.
Yeah, because she just, for some reason, ends up with this Putz, who is like...
Yeah, and I know this guy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he's usually a comedy actor, and there's definitely parts where he's just so fucking hilarious.
Well, because, he does so many, like, over-the-top reaction of, like, looking over at something. Like, I remember there was some scene where he just, like, would keep looking back over his shoulder.
It's the one where he sees the video camera, and the video camera's recording something that isn't there, and he would keep looking over, like, to see if he could see what was on the video camera, and he did it, like, 4 times, and it was so fucking funny.
And then there's, like, he has, like, 2 or 3 other chicks that he, like, wants to bang, or want to bang him, but he also, like, feels guilty. Yeah,
it's very interesting, because it's implied that he has been sleeping around, but we don't know if these women are who he was sleeping around with, or if he just wanted to, because, unfortunately, spoiler alert, at the end, Kirsty's like, so basically the Cenobites said, we'll torture your boyfriend forever and leave you alone if you sacrifice 3 people. And she's like, oh, I know, I'll pick the 3 women who cheated on me with my boyfriend. And I'm like, I don't feel like Kirsty would do this.
No.
It was very, like, bad character assassination, which ruined it because I was going with 6 quite a bit.
Yeah.
6 was actually, like, this one's called Hellseeker, by the way. So this was another one kind of like 4, where it was kind of like, it took a step up, but was still obviously a downgrade from where we had been. But in 6, I don't know if I would revisit, but I surely would revisit it before the dreaded Hellraiser Deader, which is the same movie as the last 2, but we got a feminine protagonist. And it's just in every way worse.
I literally wasn't paying attention for at least half of it. I think a lot more. I know there was like some shit of her being like in a warehouse and like surrounded by a bunch of people that were trying to.
There's a cult. Yeah. And there's a lot of like flashbacks to her abusive father, and it's like, do you get it? It's connected to it's really bad and insensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, Deader, I think before a later entry, Deader, I was like, it can't possibly get worse than this. But Hellraiser consistently proved to me that although there were points where it jumped up, no, it could in fact get worse than my current worst pick. Because Hellraiser Deader was a fucking travesty of life. I would never revisit this one.
No, absolutely.
Unless someone paid me. But after Hellraiser Deader, and just for reference, after the Scott Derrickson Inferno, Hellseeker Deader and Hellworld, which is the next one, are all the same director. And Hellraiser Hellworld, why don't you explain this one?
So, Hellraiser Hellworld is a video game where you can fuck around with the digital version of the box. And there's a digital version of Pinhead.
Because it's apparently in the real world where people know about the first film at least exists in this world.
Yeah.
Maybe more of them. I don't know.
And this group of teenagers, including Henry Cavill.
He's great.
Get invited to Lance Henriksen's mansion where he's holding like super Hellworld meet and greet convention kind of
the
thing.
Hellraiser fandom.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, he's like, this is the Hellraiser fandom. They just wear masks. None of them are, like, really into BDSM or anything.
Yeah.
Like, none of them are actual, like, weirdo freaks. They're just kind of like, we wear masks and give blowjobs.
And it's just Lance Henriksen being like, I'm totally not evil as shit, even though I'm pretty evil as shit. And it's like, are you Pinhead? You know, basically.
Well, but he isn't. Because of the very end of the movie.
Yeah, and it was another one where so they all get drugged.
Okay, because we get bits in the movie where Hellraiser is fictional, and we know this. But then they experience visions of Pinhead killing them. And, like, not doing it in Pinhead ways. Like, he takes a cleaver and just chops off a guy's head, and I'm, like, immediately like, what the fuck is happening? Because I know that this is the one where it's a video game. But then the end of the movie reveals, Lance Henriksen is like, yeah, so you caused my son to die, even though it was totally his fault. So I buried you. And I drugged you, and you all had a group hallucination that was, for some reason, completely consistent up until your death scenes. And those you just filled in through your Hellraiser hysteria. It could have been anything, but because you were Hellraiser fans, it happened to be Pinhead. This was all fake, and you were just gonna die from lack of oxygen and drugs, and your mind breaking. And then that's fucking stupid. But then the end of the movie reveals, because Lance Henriksen gets away, he has the fake box, and then he uses it, and it opens, and the actual Cenobites, the non-fictional Cenobites, show up and kill him, and it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I mean, so I watched a review where someone was like saying, like, no, the movie's basically operating on a mimetic level of, there's like this idea of like, if you believe in something hard enough, it will exist. And so all of their suffering, thinking Pinhead was real, is what caused him to be real at the end. I'm like, but that's not how it comes about. That's not how it feels. It feels more like nobody liked this, so we just put in an end scene where they're totally real. We didn't get rid of the real Pinhead. He's not just fictional.
It's not good. The best parts are Henry Cavill, and that's purely because it's hilarious.
His acting is so over the top. Like and Lance Henriksen,
like he's
too.
Just chilling, and he's like smoking a cigarette, and then he just starts coughing horrifically because he doesn't know what he's doing, and then like he's getting a blowjob, and the chick like grabs his phone and gives it to him without breaking stride.
Yeah,
blowjob, and it's fucking great.
This one was definitely like a so bad it's good.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like. I don't think this one was worse. I enjoyed this one more than Deader.
Yes, easily.
But it was more of a so bad it's good. Like the actual plot and characters were like as bad as Deader.
Yeah, quality-wise, I'd say they're the same objectively, but I think if you are bad and boring, that is so much worse than if you are bad and hilarious. Because again, I remember more or less what happens in Hellworld, but I don't fucking remember anything in Deader.
Deader's a fucking mess.
It's a blur. You know what else is a mess? Hellraiser 9 Revelations.
We didn't get Doug Bradley back for the one that most mimics the first movie.
No, we got this dude who looks really good, but except he doesn't look really good as Pinhead.
No, he looks bad.
And then we dub over him with Fred Tatasciore, who...
he tries.
He does try.
Kind of.
Except when he doesn't.
Yeah, this is this is a bad movie.
It's really shitty. Like, it's this family grieving because their kids went down to Mexico and apparently died, but
yes,
then one of them comes back and you're like, oh,
and he's wearing the other one's skin. What a twist.
Oh my god. I've never seen that happen before.
And they kind of make it a found footage movie, like
in
slightly.
Parts,
yeah.
I think one of the biggest problems is you make one of the kids that goes down to Mexico just be a complete dickhead for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, he immediately, like, they accidentally kill a prostitute. And then he's immediately like, no, we're in too deep. We have to do whatever the fuck, and, you know, like, his friend is like, oh, we just need to talk this out and, you know, resolve this and fix this.
Yeah.
And he's just like, no, I'll kill you if you try to do this. And it's like, what? I feel like friends wouldn't just turn on
He
each
was
other
just
like
always
this.
a psychopath.
He was just always a psychopath.
Because his parents are just like, they're maybe a little, they don't pay enough attention to their kid, but they're not evil.
No!
So he's just kind of like a psychopath from Jump Street, and then he becomes a Cenobite.
And he tries to fuck his sister while she thinks it's her boyfriend.
Yes he does.
It's a lot of...
Yeah, this whole movie was cheap as fuck.
Yeah.
Like, this is very clearly, like, made on a shoestring fucking budget.
Yeah, this was the one they made where they realized they were about to lose the rights.
Yes.
So we were like, oh, we have to crank one out. And
3 weeks or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it.
And it feels like it.
They were gonna bring Doug Bradley back, but they basically said, you don't get to look at the script, and we're paying you, like, half of what you made for the first movie. He's like, that's not even remotely fair. Fuck you.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I think Hellraiser Revelations is the worst.
I would agree. And it's so bizarre, because that is written by Gary J. Tunnicliffe, who goes on to direct and write the next movie, Hellraiser Judgment.
Which is really good.
Which is incredible. And he acts in that and is really good.
Yeah, well, again, 3 weeks, if he just had more time, because the gap between these two films is so huge.
Yeah.
And I remember going into this, I'm like, oh, I remember Revelations, like, getting some heat, but I feel like no one's even mentioned this. So in my mind, I was like, this is the very, very worst. Yeah. We're going to end on the shittiest of notes with our Hellraiser watch through. And then it turned out, no, Hellraiser Judgment is legitimately the third best film in the franchise. Like, it's better than 4. It's better than, like, any of them besides maybe 2. Like, you could argue that.
Like, Pinhead is absolutely incredible, which is surprising because it's not Doug Bradley, but...
But he's so good at mirroring Doug Bradley's mannerisms and acting like... So explain, like, what they would say to him.
So it's really good. So he said the director, that the actor for Pinhead that they got had the presence, the sort of atmosphere of Peter Cushing and someone, Ralph Fiennes. He said that he has sort of that mix. So whenever they would shoot a scene with Pinhead, and the director wanted him to be a little more, like, subtle, a little more nuanced, a little bit more, you know, just above it all, he would come up to him and just whisper, "You're far too trusting." And then, like, they do it again to get him in the mindset. And yeah, it's so... Like,
yeah, it's Paul T. Taylor is the actor, by the way.
Yeah, and he's magnificent.
And it's funny. Apparently, the director was inspired by the. We'll get to what the ending of this movie is, but he said, "Yeah, no, the ending of 2 really inspired me to do the ending of this movie." And I'm like, "Well, that makes sense why it's so good."
Mm-hmm.
But this movie it's interesting because it kind of takes all the stuff they've been trying to do since the 5th movie, but, like, better. Because they're like, what if we had, like, these detective characters investigating? We did, like, the noir version of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
But they didn't, like, make it stupid. Like, I actually cared about the characters.
Yeah, the crime that they were investigating was really, like, interesting and compelling.
Yeah.
Where it's like the executor? Or is that, I forget what, the serial killer that they're chasing down.
Yeah. In this movie, the whole thing is them following the preceptor. Who's basically killing people like the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit. And the movie opens with this surreal ass scene of just someone getting processed through hell. And it is so good. Because, like, every little bit of it, I was just like, wow, you really thought out, like, every aspect of how this works. And, like, the director was playing the auditor, who was basically, like, interrogating people and figuring out what their sins were. And just it was surreal, but, like, it never, like, pushed it too far. It felt like, no, like, hell has a structure, but still weird shit's gonna happen to you.
Absolutely.
And just so from the beginning, I'm just, like, hooked. I'm like, I can't believe it. Hellraiser Judgment is like I'm really fucking interested in these characters. And then it slowly goes along. I forget the exact plot point because it's basically one of the detectives is revealed to be the killer. And then there's a point where like his sins get processed and they're so awful that the gluttonous guy who like eats your sins basically and then decides your judgment, he's like, no, I almost died. Like, it was that bad. And there's this interesting thing where there's this weird conflict where no, it turns out God wants the serial killer to be around so more people will be fearful and driven to him. And Pinhead's like, that's awful.
Because at first, because you see him like get processed and something's wrong with it. Like, it's not like the first guy that we see where like it all goes perfectly and he gets tortured as shit. They're like, no, something's wrong. And there's like this angel that pops up. They're like, hey, you need to let this guy go now. It's like, oh, so is he like a really good person and you can't, and like we're saving him from damnation?
It's before
like,
you realize that he's the killer.
Yeah. And then you find out, no, he's so terrible that he puts the fear of God into people. So he's God sanctioned.
Yeah, he is. He's promoting the old Wrath of God style belief. So we were keeping him on Earth and we will make sure he stays there until the time is right. It's like, wow, you guys are assholes. And like they totally effortlessly make Pinhead consistent with his original counterpart, but also like morally in the right of like, no, fuck you guys, I'm rebelling against God.
It's so great because she's just like, oh, you have to release him from this dimension, bring him back to the real world, and he's like, all right, fine, and does it, and then he immediately gets shot and dies, and she's like, you knew that would happen.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I did.
And you would think that the Hellraiser movie, where literally someone in white, bathed by a white light, who is an angel, like coming into the plot, would be the breaking point of the series. I was like, no, they pulled it off so well. Like, I was legitimately like, wow, none of the previous movies really talked about God too much, but I am totally invested in this character.
Yeah.
And what is happening. And basically, the movie ends with Pinhead being punished by God, and he is now a human. He is now mortal.
Yeah, because he kills the angel with his fucking hooks.
Yeah.
And she's just like, we're gonna make you suffer, and he's like, oh, I love suffering. And then he like gets the worst prize ever, and he just gets made human.
Yeah.
And it makes me so excited for the next one, because I know the director already had an idea for the plot of having the Auditor join up with human Pinhead to replace his replacement.
Because that sounds so good.
That sounds really
just
good.
Like an hour at least of Auditor and Pinhead going through normal New York, just having wacky adventures sounds like so great.
This is also the first and so far only Hellraiser movie to have a post-credits scene. Where they're like,
oh yeah,
they have their new house, and I think it's in Germany. 2 missionaries like come up to the door and get let in, and he's like, 2 already? This isn't even the Tuesday.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
What the fuck is this?
It's so good. Like, Judgment again is like the third best at least.
Like, the biggest complaint that I've seen from the movie is how horrifically inaccurate police procedure is portrayed.
Oh, like, well, yeah. Like,
whatever.
Get fucked. I mean, it's not like 5, 6, and 7 weren't horribly just off with how they processed it.
God, no.
And so it all ended up like with a happy ending where we were like, wow, I really liked this movie.
After such a long interlude of pain and suffering, we get to like one of the best ones.
Because even 6 was like, well, this is bad. It's like, because like 4, I think, was the last one we were like, okay, I can genuinely say this is a pretty good movie. And then 2 was the last one where we were like, I can say this is a good movie. Then 1 was the last great one. And this one was like, no, this is a good movie. So I would definitely say that if you're going to watch the Hellraiser movies, my recommendation, if you want a complete story, 1, 2, Judgment 4. If you want just like what I would say are the best, again, I need to reappraise 4, but I would say 1, 2, and Judgment is a nice trilogy for you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real nice quality horror films there. But if I was ranking them, I believe I have my ranking up, and I'll say it and you can agree or disagree. The top 1, Hellraiser 1.
Yes.
Duh. Hellraiser 2. Hellbound.
And honestly, I'd have to see Judgment and Hellbound back to back, honestly, because I think again, because you really like Judy, whatever her name is,
Julie,
chick. Yeah, and I'm sort of ambivalent towards her. Like, I know her coming back as like one of the big bads in 2 was kind of your bread and butter, but I was sort of like,
well, that's part of why it feels consistent, because I feel like, because Julie's one of the best aspects of what makes Hellraiser 1 like really unique, and I like her whole dynamic with her husband and with Frank and how that plays off of Kirsty. I think that's really good, and yeah, she is one of the main big bads of 2, but there's also a lot more going on anyway. But yeah, then I'd put Judgment, the dark horse that comes out of nowhere.
Oh boy, yeah.
And then I would say 4, Bloodline, which I think is better than I gave it credit for, especially when I saw how low it could go.
Yeah.
Like when you compare 4 to like Deader, it's like, wow, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah, oh, seriously.
Then I would say, oh man, I'm changing my mind maybe. Right here I have 3 and then Hellraiser Hellseeker, which is 6.
Yeah.
Do you agree with 3 being better than 6? Because 6 kind of fucks Kirsty's character, but is pretty enjoyable and well paced. And 3 fucks Pinhead's character, but it's also like,
I think it is a higher tier Deader versus Hellworld scenario, where quality wise they're probably equal. But I think Hellraiser 3 is more goofy and hilarious.
It is more goofy.
To Hellseeker, so it'll probably be what puts it over for me.
3, and then after that Hellseeker, and then we get to the bottom where I think. Oh man, the way I laid this out was, so Inferno. 5 was next, and again, just by dint of technically the direction is better than everything after it, and it has a budget of sorts, but it's really bad.
Yeah.
And then Hellworld, which I think is so bad it's good.
Yeah.
And then Deader, which
is so bad it's bad.
Made me feel dead.
Yeah.
And then Revelations, I think, is the very worst.
It's absolutely abhorrent.
Because you don't have Doug Bradley.
And
he's not Paul Taylor.
And you don't have characters that you care about dealing with this evil.
No, not at all.
Like, because you have the entire family as a victim, but you don't give a shit about any of them.
Well, they're a victim, or they're also, like, morally corrupt.
Yeah.
So it's like, well... And it's not like a Hellraiser movie needs good characters, like, morally good characters. But there's always, like, somebody who you can root for.
Remember how he, like, kills the guy and he's like, hey, as you're dying, I'm going to reveal that you had an affair with this woman. And it's like, this is just kind of petty and stupid.
Yeah.
And it's like...
A lot of that movie was really petty and stupid. Yeah, again, the one that is most, like, trying to... Because the Hellraiser movies are weird because none of them really tried to just remake the first movie. And that's probably because they were planning to do a remake for, like, years.
Yeah, that's what it is.
But Revelations is the one that most follows the basic plot structure of 1. And it is the worst. Because even, like, Deader and Hellseeker and Inferno are all basically the same story. But that's not the first movie. This is this weird new concept that we got. This noir Hellraiser film. Yeah, that's just interesting to me.
Yeah, again, I like that it didn't get repetitive and just repeating the plot of the first movie of, someone has escaped and is, building up a skin. But then, because we have 3 movies that are... This person escaped from the Cenobites.
Yeah, that's 1, 2, and Revelations.
Yeah, and then we have 3 movies, we have like 4 movies where it's I'm investigating.
Because technically, Judgment is that.
Yeah, Judgment falls under that.
Yeah,
and then we have 3 and 4 and Hellworld,
which are kind of the slasher ones. I mean, 4 doesn't really fall under that as much, but I would say that 3 and Hellworld are definitely like Pinhead as a slasher character.
Yeah. Absolutely,
because that's how. Yeah, so I think 4 is kind of the closest to being an odd man out.
I'd agree.
Where it's like doing something very different that no other Hellraiser movie really did. This kind of time jumping narrative, which is good because it makes it unique. But yeah, I would say it was worthwhile to go through just to be validated with Judgment. Yeah, because I would have stopped after 2, and then having seen 4, I would have stopped after 4 because that's the end of the story. But I was validated by Judgment not being the worst and the third best.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So I am glad I did it.
Yes.
I do think we could get a good remake. But I'm sad that it won't be Clive Barker doing it. And, it doesn't have to be Doug Bradley. I got won over by Paul Taylor. But of course, I love Doug Bradley, so...
Doug Bradley is magnificent.
He's the thing that kind of carries you through some of those really shitty ones.
And it's really interesting, because I'd say out of all of the horror marathons we've done, this is probably the one I would not repeat. Like, I'd be willing...
All the way through?
All the way through. Like,
sure.
I'd be willing to go through our Nightmare, Friday the 13th, the fucking Evil Dead.
Evil Dead.
That cinematic universe. I'd go through that all again. And that's way more movies than Hellraiser, but...
But That one also has some shit.
It does. It absolutely does.
I think what it is those movies are usually kind of just harmless.
Yes.
Whereas I think like what it is like Friday the 13th Part 1 is not such a great film that Part 2 like sinks it. It's a pretty decent film. Whereas like Hellraiser 1 I say is like a really good film. Mm-hmm. So when they go bad, it's like, oh, you lost the potential. Whereas like I mean, I guess Halloween is probably the one that bothers me. Like once you get to like H2 by Rob Zombie, I'm like, wow, this or the fucking found footage resurrection where oh, you didn't really cut off Michael Myers' head. So I'd say like that one is probably the one that hurts almost as much as Hellraiser, but I would agree Hellraiser's a tough one to commit to going through all of them.
I think what it is that since
it also has never rebooted. Yeah, Hellraiser is never rebooted. I mean, you could say that some of them aren't in the same, but there's no evidence of that.
I'd also say what makes it different from those other ones is the fact that while it doesn't reboot, I think it reinvents itself a lot more than the other ones. Yeah. So it just becomes bad in different ways, whereas like those other series just get more and more wackadoodle of doing the same old shit, which is, I would vote, more entertaining. Like imagine you go through 1 through 4 of Hellraiser. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this gets fucking bug nuts, shit in space, and Pinhead being a slasher villain, and then at 5 is like this really sobering like noir that just doesn't go anywhere, and then
6 assassinates Kersey's character.
Yeah.
And 7's just 7, and then Hellworld is just like, Hellworld is what people think of Jason X, whereas I think Jason X is actually one of the best of the Friday the 13th series.
And it is.
Whereas Hellworld, I would say, is like, really, like, because people go like, oh, what about Hellraiser in space? I'm like, no, 4 is like god tier compared to Hellworld. And then you got 9, which is, we finally redid the first movie, and it's way bad.
And 4, you have the nice comfort throughout the rest of the series, knowing that in the end
it will loop back around.
Yeah, it's all gonna. In the end, we have absolutely destroyed evil, and we have not undone that in any of the future films.
Yeah, which is nice. That is nice. In fact, it makes me hope that like if Judgment gets a sequel, they somehow tie it to loop back into the storyline to bring him to where he is back in power, but now he's like more malevolent than, because he was kind of on the side of justice and Judgment. So but I do agree that's 4's strength. So I guess Hellraiser would be the one where some of the highs are higher than some other series, but the lows are so much lower that it's hard to commit to rewatch. So I would agree with you. I own all the movies. I got them for dirt cheap. I got the first like 7, or sorry, I got the first 2, and then I got the rest, and then
you just need to go back and get good copies of 1, 2, and Judgment.
Yeah, I mean, I have 1 and 2 on Blu-ray.
Okay, so
but I need Judgment on Blu-ray because some of those visuals are pretty nice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, that was Hellraiser. We hadn't talked about it in a while, and then Nathan was worried that some of it would fade. And I'm like, the ones that fade are the ones we really didn't have much to say. They were just bad.
Yeah,
like the middle 3.
Yeah, we didn't really need to go super in depth. No, we didn't. We just had a nice sort of go through of our experience.
Horror marathons are always like such a weird bag.
Very fascinating.
Yeah, because it's such a different beast than some other franchises where it's like, no, these are just consistently this, or I know what I'm going to get with this.
Which you know what we'll have to do next year. Now that we've gone
the Child's Play series. They did do the new one with Mark Hamill.
Yeah,
and apparently that one's really good.
I hadn't thought of that. I was thinking of the Ring and the Grudge series.
I'll do the Ring and the Grudge if you do Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think that's the other big American horror series that we haven't done for good reason.
For very good reason.
Because I've seen most of them, and wow. So that was Hellraiser. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. We tweet about current media things, and stay tuned for our next video.